Susan and I were just reflecting that it's typically this time of the day where energy starts to wane a little bit, so we're going to try and boost you up again. And we're slightly changing our dynamic. So rather than sitting or just having one of us, we're fully embracing the day after International Women's Day and giving you two of potentially Aon's best. And we want to effectively give you a conversation about well-being, human sustainability, and with a thread of being very human in the mix. So we're both open to sharing our story. We've got 2.5 people on the stage, you may have noticed, so there's definite new challenges for Suze as we speak. But we're going to go on a bit of a journey, aren't we, Suze? And I know we've had the kind introductions from Rob already, but how about you throw a question my way and then we can start to work our way through the slides?
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope you don't mind. I have a bit of an adapted question to ask you because I just noticed that it is Rachel's almost 1 year, actually just 1 year anniversary at Aon. So happy anniversary. And what I'd like to ask you is about, I guess, the context of what's happened over that year and how it's influenced how you've actually approached your role.
Yeah, well, I didn't know you knew that, so that's very good research. Yeah, it's officially 1 year today. I just want to do a quick show of hands. Was anyone here last year? So I don't know if you've gone on the homepage for this event and noticed a very attractive blonde lady who happens to be my boss, who those who put their hand up may have heard last year, Lisa Stevens, our Global Chief People Officer. Knowingly, beautifully curated or not, I'm following on and continuing her story from last year. And to answer your question, Suze, like, Aon didn't have a Chief Wellbeing Officer before I joined, which is in part amazing and in part quite intimidating. So the way I want to answer your question, Suze, is maybe there are fellow peers in the room, so it might be interesting to almost share how I'd frame my role. And then I kind of want to talk about a little bit also about my own journey through that. So what I would say is one of Lisa Stevens' key strengths is spotting emerging risks. So we could come onto the stage, and maybe I'll just give you a nice little bit of a backdrop. We could come onto the stage and start talking about risks that we know are there. That might be cyber, it might be climate change, but really in 2020, maybe even 2019, Lisa Stevens was very astute to start thinking about what was going on in the world. And maybe simply, we've got global things going on the right-hand side here that were beginning to wobble more than they had before. And we also had things going on the left-hand side. It wasn't colleague cushioning at the time. We were beginning to hear little rumors of a great resignation that then transitioned to quiet quitting. And now we're talking about, apparently, employee cushioning. But all of this context is uncertainty and volatility. And Lisa thought, as the pandemic hit, how do we lean most into the reality of mental health and ill-being being a genuine emerging risk for us and for our clients? And that's where, Suze, as you know, I was running my own business at the time, and Lisa became a client. Like, what a better way to be interviewed. She was also very cheeky, because she asked me to coach Greg Case, Eric Anderson, our full Aon executive team, and basically I was being grilled about whether they wanted a Chief Wellbeing Officer at the time. So hence I arrived a year later, and I also brought with me something we're going to come on to. But I think maybe just to add in, historically at Aon, we're an insurance business. We are now very much a professional services business. But for me, where do I want to land my own well-being business? Well, in the environment of an organization that genuinely measures risk. And I thought that was a fantastic opportunity. And so for me, I'm thinking about working with Aon and our partnerships across the world and in the different functions or bits of Aon. We call them solution lines, but that might not mean anything to anybody else. And ultimately saying, we were talking about well-being. We then started talking about resilience and bouncing back. But really, we're in the game of how do we sustain ourselves now? Because I don't have a clue, and I've got a master's and a title that implies that I should. And this is the reality, Suze, that I think, whether we're at different life stages or not, we need to be thinking about, both as humans, but also as an organization. And I would say just how I've then framed that in my role is twofold. I actually look after the internal well-being strategy globally for Aon. So that's 50,000 colleagues across 120 countries, if you're at the back over there. But really interesting, I chose to also lead well-being globally for our clients. Because I can only get Aon to pull their socks up if we're also working in partnership with what is going on externally, and vice versa. So hopefully that's a good story about the first year at Aon.
She's been very busy. And I suppose just in terms of, you talked about risk, and that makes me think about the data that comes from human sustainability and people risk. So could you tell us more about the accountability for that data, and actually accountability overall for human sustainability?
Yeah, so does anyone like cars? Yeah, so my husband used to be in insurance. There's a bit of a fun thing there, but now he's a classic car dealer. So I'm going to go for the lifting the bonnet analogy. So when I arrived at Aon, what data did I have if I want to embrace well-being? And I'm just going to be a bit candid, maybe even a bit clumsy with my language. I had lots of ill-being data. I didn't have well-being data. So I know we've talked about that lightly already today, but I had access to EAP data. We were just on the cusp of even integrating it into our engagement survey. We also had some other feedback loops, but it was fairly minimal. So the first thing I thought about was, A, let's make what we do have global and routined, and then let's start to think about what's missing, because I can't make a global strategy off 10% of the population. So we started to use something called the Human Sustainability Index. And the reason I quite like it is because it's got 3 layers, which start to indicate, to your point, who is accountable for well-being. Because hopefully it's not just me, because otherwise I think I'll fall over pretty soon. So we want to start to think about culturally, what if we take the whole organization through understanding what individual sustainability means, understanding actually, technically, we're a part of a team, aren't we, Suze? So how do we create team resilience in the way that we work? I'd recommend not landing 3 minutes before you're due to be here. I literally made it to the seat of my pants today. And then organizationally, for a Greg Case, our global CEO, what does he need to be thinking about? So we've started on this thread of actually capturing new data, which is quite a surprise, I think, for most, because I think people thought I'd look under the bonnet and go, oh, that looks nice, and I'm going to go for it. But I paused, and that's felt really important. And just to continue on that vein, Suze, the reason I think it's important, and I don't know if anyone actually has well-being in their responsibility, but with my internal hat, I've actually chosen not to employ anyone, which might be a surprise, but I'm not going to create a well-being empire that is standalone and siloed. What I'm going to try and do is actually best partner with the whole people function. So I'm integrating well-being alongside other things, and very much thinking about it from a talent acquisition. So how are we even putting my name and the brand around well-being out there on our recruitment sites, let alone offering something really novel like Human Sustainability Index when we're onboarding people. And I promise I'll pause in a mo, Suze, but on that final pillar, I know it looks like one of 6. That's the most important one to me, and why actually having external responsibility in my role is really key, because we can start to partner with the business facing that may seem most removed from the agenda.
And I guess as you're 1 year in, I'd love to, and you've mentioned already the engagement that you're to do at the very senior level. What about the investment in Aon and the journey that you've actually brought the business on within this year? I think it's really valuable for the group to hear more and for you to share.
And I love a TED talk, but I know we've got 2 minutes left. So I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour, and we can share, if you take a photo of this, and you can look at it a little bit more detail. But maybe I'll do a little jig across the stage, Suze. And the first thing I did was do an audit on what we've got. And then from there, I thought, within the existing mechanisms of data, where can I plant well-being? So all of our pulse surveys, all of our engagement surveys have well-being questions taught to the proactive, not just the ill-being side. And then we started, based on that, to create a baseline of the human sustainability data. And I was really thoughtful. We haven't rolled it out to everybody. What I've done is roll it out to the most at-risk areas, namely new colleagues. How do you do that in a virtual hybrid working environment? But also high performers. High performers are a beautiful seedbed of burnout. So how do we start to unpick some of those, especially if we have the image of a high performer as one that works all the time? So effectively, Suze, we've gone on a journey of creating data. We've got it into the rhythm of Aon, and then making some really specific interventions. And now I'm going bold. So I'm going to be quite public, and maybe we'll come on to that shortly with the boldness behind it. But we're doing our homework, our groundwork on that data to hopefully pivot Aon to somewhere new at the end of the year.
Well, I know each year we produce a people or an impact report, and we make some commitments, and you actually have a quote in it, and you have made actually some bold commitments. So I think often the question we get asked is well-being a fluffy topic? Does it have sustainability to last over the next few years? So what's your advice on how to make this give it longevity?
Yeah, so 3 things from me. I am determined to make Aon the first organisation where our Aon Executive Committee have well-being as a goal, i.e. they are remunerated on well-being, based on well-being measures using the Human Sustainability Index. So we have that as a runway already with D&I, 30% of their bonuses are attributed to that. So it should be an easy sell. And I'm using the language of belonging to get there. Because you need to consider the well-being of an individual, regardless of where they come from, who they are, what their value set, and the choices about their life design is. Secondly, so once the Aon Executive Committee actually then own well-being, it's not my thing, I want to make myself redundant as quickly as possible in the nicest possible way, we then need to start formally on whole reporting. And this isn't just internally, but we've got a quote in our impact report, but now we need numbers. And I think the most interesting thing from the last 3 quarterly earnings calls of Aon, we've been asked about the state of our well-being, the sustainability of our talent. It's almost like engagement is no longer landing on the right ears. They want the next layer down. And so we're actually going to start to put numbers behind that. So our CEO and our president can actually say, well, we can see our resilience, our sustainability is changed here, here, and here. So that's it.
Thank you. And I think we're just
at time.
I see Rob coming up.
Thank you.